the Abscondo Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on the Abscondo Podcast. This is Mark Manny, and today we're going to talk about a really fun topic, desire. So, I came across a couple verses from the Daodejing, and I won't pretend to be some kind of historic expert on the Daodejing or on Lao Tzu, the author. If you know something about it, you probably know about as much as I do, which is that it was written, I guess, about 2,500 years ago in China. Nobody knows much about Lao Tzu. I guess somebody asked him to write down his wisdom, and what he produced is this really short work that everyone should read. And I would recommend and I enjoy the Stephen Mitchell translation, because like any historic spiritual work, there's multiple translations. And what happens over the years is that many people get involved in these translations, and a lot of them aren't really spiritually aware, so they don't really know what to make of these verses. So Stephen Mitchell did a really good job, I think, bringing out the sort of the spiritual aliveness of the Daodejing into this version. So anyway, I came across these two interesting verses. I think they're back to back, although the sentences aren't back to back, but the verses, I think 36 and 37. And I didn't really expect this or plan this, but what happened is, I do these daily posts on Instagram, Abscondo, and on abscondo.com, and on the I Am by Info Being application, the mobile app. So I do these daily posts, and the first one was this. I'll read the first one to you, and then I'll explain the second. If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. Okay? So what I wrote about that is this. When we resist an experience, desire for it only grows. When we fight an impulse, it only strengthens. When we interfere in the lives of others, they only become more determined. When we say no to an opportunity, we become stuck. To do is to know. To allow is to teach. Now we follow our intuition. We do what excites us. We allow others the same freedom. We let things run their course. This is how we arrive at the truth. So getting rid of something means allowing it to be, not fighting it. And I think this is a core that anyone who has any kind of spiritual practice will recognize. Acceptance of something, letting it be, is kind of one of the basic essence ideas of any spiritual faith or religion. Now, when it comes to the topic of desire, often we have a little bit of a different opinion. The typical approach to desires, fantasies, things that we know maybe we shouldn't do, we try to subdue it, we try to fight against it. And of course, throughout history, pretty much any religion or spiritual practice is all about denying our pleasures and our passions and our desires. But the Daodejing just said, what? If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. Okay, so along comes this next passage. I think it is in 37 in Daodejing. When there is no desire, all things are at peace. Yeah, okay. The question I have is, so how do we make it so there's no desire? Now, let's go back to the other passage. To get rid of something, allow it to flourish. Wow. You follow? My line of reasoning here is that, and it's something that I've experienced in my own life, that if we want to get rid of desire, right, so that we have total peace, which I agree to be absent of desire. What is desire? First of all, desire is wanting something you don't have, badly craving something you want, right? So it's something you haven't experienced, you don't know fully, you think you really want to, and you want it really bad. Now, if you get rid of that desire, you're obviously at peace, and the whole world's at peace, if that happens on a massive scale. So how? Is it by denying? Is it by our moral practices? Is it by our religious practices to deny the self what you want? Is it by distracting ourselves through consumption, through addictions, things like this? that's what's typically done to deny our desires. But what the Daodejing is teaching is that we must allow them to flourish, to get rid of them. Obviously. Because if you do what you desire, if you live your fantasy, if you follow your passion, if you do what excites you, then what happens? Well, then it becomes not a desire anymore. Then it becomes simply knowledge that you have because you know what it is. So if you hold back from following your desires, what happens then? You get stuck. Actually, you want that thing even more because you can't have it. Okay? So to get rid of our desires, the way to do that is to let them flourish, to let them be, to chase them, to do them. It's very simple. And what happens when you do that, and I've done this over and over again in my life, what happens is that it's no longer a desire. You find inner peace because you know what that thing is. You turn a desire into knowledge. Osho says, doing is knowing. Kind of an obvious quote, but it's true. You have to do something to know what that thing is. So desire is a fantasy based not on any knowledge of what that is. I think I'm making the point. I may be belaboring it a little bit, actually. But I find this to be something, in the Taoist tradition. I mean, this is basically, I guess, a religion in the world, right? It's a pretty big thing. And I'm wondering, maybe someone out there can correct me, does somebody who follows Taoism, do they see this, which is written plainly, obviously, in the Daodejing? Not as maybe the Buddhists would do, which is to deny yourself, to meditate, to let go of thought as an attempt to avoid desire, but to follow your desire, let them flourish. And this is really characteristic of the Daodejing, because it's constantly, it's basically just saying that there's a way things are. If you have a desire, there must be a reason why you have that desire. And I'm not drawing the line here. Let's talk about sex, right? I mean, sexual desire is probably the most common desires we have, the most primal, and we deny them. Now, why do you think, it's kind of maybe even cliche or conventional wisdom to say that the denying your sexual desires leads to a lot of other problems. And I think even the therapist might agree with me there. And yet we have these practices such as monogamous marriage, pretty much throws out the ability to pursue any sexual desires. And there's all kinds of other things. There's all kinds of other things that we dream of doing. I used to dream of writing a book. And for years and years, I wanted to be an author. I thought that if I could be an author, that I could find myself and I could do what I meant to be in this world. And this went on for years until one day I started writing the book, and I finished writing the first book, and I've written several books. What I found out is that it's no panacea to write a book. You still have to find an audience. You still have to find someone to read it. It's not like you become an author. So I knew what the reality of writing a book is. And now that I know what it is, I enjoy it for what it is, or I do it for the reasons that are real, not the fantasy of it, right? Same thing with music. I've always, I started out just kind of messing around playing cover songs I like, and then one day you just want to write your own song, and then what happens next? You want to record that song, and then you want an audience, and you want to have a band, you want to perform and tour. I did all that at a very late age in life for the same reason that it was kind of haunting me. It was a desire I had for a long time. I did the same thing when I moved from Seattle to Košice, Slovakia, of all places, and I've lived here for so many years. But it was just a desire I had to one day live in Europe, to live in Slovakia, where I'd spent a lot of time every year. So every time you do this, every time you follow your dreams, you just do it. It's crazy, however craziness it is. And I do it sexually. I do it with every hobby, with, friendship. You just follow whatever that impulse is. And then what happens is that the reality of that relationship, the reality of that place, the reality of that art form, the reality of that job, the reality of whatever it is that you're desiring. And as soon as you know the reality, then you settle. Either you leave that for reasons you understand, you stay with it for reasons you understand, right? Or you change something about it, but you're moving forward and you're at peace. You're at peace because your life is filled with everything you want to do. You know, it makes you suffer when you dream of something and you're not allowed to do something. This is why so many people are so miserable, because they don't allow themselves, who am I to do this, right? I made a promise that I would never do this. My religion wouldn't let me do this. My wife wouldn't let me do this. My husband wouldn't let me do this. I'm a parent. I can't do this. I can't say this out loud in front of my kids. I mean, there are so many ways we deny ourselves our desires. We're afraid to fail. We use that as an excuse a lot, right? But it's not really the case. We're just afraid to pursue our desires. And, if you're in a situation where someone really doesn't let you, it can be painful, and it can be a terrible situation to be in if you're not allowed to flourish. If your desires aren't allowed to flourish, you're not allowed to flourish. I'll say that again. If your desires are not allowed to flourish, then you are not allowed to flourish, and you will never find peace. Now, maybe you don't have any desires sexually. Maybe you don't have any desires to artistically or career-wise, and that's fine. But if you have some desires, go out and do it. And maybe you find out that it's not even possible. Maybe you find out that you can't find people to join you in your fantasy world. And that's fine, because you know why? You just learned that that's the reality, right? So instead of sitting back here, thinking that every person out there is waiting to be your fan, or every woman out there is waiting to make love to you, you actually find out as you get out there and try to do it that that's not really the case. So you don't live with this agony thinking, well, I would be rich and famous, or I would be this playboy, or whatever it may be. You live with the knowledge of how the world actually is, and how you actually are, and how other people actually are. And that brings peace. And everything is as it should be. So no, it's not a weakness to follow our passions, to do what excites us, to speak plainly. And I certainly understand why somebody would not choose to do that, because there are very real consequences. I'm not denying that. I've paid the price many times. Although, interestingly, I think if you stay committed to love, and I can't leave this podcast without saying this, follow your desires in love. Do it lovingly. When you do things lovingly, there is no sin. The Course in Miracles says, sin is where love is not. And that's absolutely true. The very same act can be done lovelessly, and then it's very sinful in the sense that it harms people, causes negative, emotion and pain and destruction. Or the same act can be done lovingly, with tenderness, with compassion, in friendship and brotherhood and sisterhood with people. And then it's successful no matter what the outcome. So, I would put a little twist on the Daodejing to let your desires flourish, let everything flourish that you might want to get rid of, right? Maybe the same is true for some other addictions or something, where maybe you just need to, they say, when you're trying to quit smoking cigarettes, go smoke a bunch of packs in the closet and get so sick of cigarette smoke that you don't want to even deal with it anymore, right? I mean, that could be the way. I don't know when it comes to addiction. There's other, chemicals at work and things like that. But basically in life, follow your desires, do what excites you. There's a reason why you're excited. That's nature saying that it's nature pulling you in that direction. But do it lovingly, right? Never lose sight of the love. Never use people. Do it in a way that serves others, that benefits everyone. Spread the love. Spread the light inside you. Chase your passions. I'll leave it at that. I think I've made the point. I might have missed something, and I'd be happy to hear from anyone maybe who has studied Taoism or the Daodejing at all. And I've read it several times over the last couple of years, but I'm not any expert. But I think this is what its position on our desires, which is very different from other faiths. So I always, at the end of the podcast, leave it with one of my songs, and I think the most appropriate for this podcast is "Candle Glow" from the Midnight Snow Abscondo album way back in 2008. Thank you once again for joining me in the Abscondo Podcast.
Through our days we go, delusions and our goals, dreams of wealth and fame. But that don't make me whole, so watch my self-control burning in the flame. We put on such a show in daylight 'cause we know what's real and what's a game. But that don't make you grow, and girl, I know your soul, and it can't be contained. These pleasures will run deep, the secrets we shall keep, unspoken and unseen. And without words we know it's fragile and it's weak when I've blown the flame. Place where no one goes, so undo all those clothes. To touch makes me insane. We lose all self-control. Is that what makes us whole? Pleasures mixed with pain. These pleasures will run deep, the secrets we shall keep, unspoken and unseen. And without words we know it's fragile and it's weak when I've blown the flame. But in the candle glow, lost sight of all we know, and only bliss remains. When off to sleep we go, I know you'll know my soul. Remember in the rain. When off to sleep we go, I know you'll know my soul. Remember in the rain.